join me, okay? We're going to talk about the climate and you just join me, okay? Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Becky Sphere, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, which there are a few new subscribers, hi! Welcome! I'm happy to have you. If you don't know who I am, my name is Becky, and every Monday and Thursday we talk about the climate here. The problems, yes. But the solutions, yes! So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, hit the like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And also, very important, this Thursday there is going to be a climate book club meeting. We are going to be reading chapters 5 and 6 of Climate Courage by Andreas Karelas. So please make sure, if you haven't done so already, to go ahead and get your own copy of the book and read to chapter 6 if you can. And even if you haven't done so by the time of the book club, which is at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, still go ahead and join us in the live stream, because you will still learn a lot from these book club sessions. It's basically a time where Becky rants about different topics that are being covered in the chapters. So it's a good time. Bring your own special beverage if it helps. Today, we are going to talk about what I deem to be the top 10 misconceptions about climate change. Let's get started. Number 1, we don't have to deal with it yet. This is just not true. It's here, the data shows it, and honestly, we probably should have dealt with this issue before it was actually here. So now we have to deal with it faster. We got the melting ice for sure. We have the wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, floods. Really, Rue? You're gonna eat right now. Is it okay if I just talk with Rue eating in the background? Is that a reasonable thing to do on YouTube? Because he's gonna do what he's gonna do. In addition to the fact that there are definitely long-term impacts that we are starting to see right now, there are also short-term impacts of greenhouse gas emitting companies and practices that are not good either for people's health and for air and water quality in different regions. So that should be another reason in itself to deal with the issue. I've heard from a decent amount of people that they think that it's not as big of a deal as originally it was presented, because they haven't seen any drastic change from things like tipping points. And that encouraged me to go ahead and make tipping points be the video for next week. It's unfortunate because tipping points are real. It's basically when there's a point in the environment where it is either irreversible and or it drastically changes the overall global system. And those are definitely things that we have to worry about. Yes, most of them are still not quite past the point of no return yet, which is good, because if they were, we would have a lot more of a depressing video here. So that's a very interesting argument that I see a lot for people thinking that, okay, well maybe it's not as bad as people think, so therefore we really don't have to deal with it right now. And that's just not true, unfortunately. We do need to deal with this issue, and fast. Misconception number 2, it's all over and we're screwed. So now we're on the other side of the extreme, which I have also seen, which is that it's too late, we're screwed, there's no way that humanity is going to change fast enough for something like this to not happen. And to some extent, and I mean, history is on the side of people to say that we haven't really moved very fast on this issue, but there's also history to suggest with similar issues that we have moved fast. For example, a very good argument is the ozone layer. We found that was a very big threat to humanity, and we globally decided to phase out the different chemicals in refrigeration, AC, and aerosols that were causing the ozone layer to thin. And so that is a big win. Now granted, then we switched it to HFCs, which are also not good, but in this last spending bill in the US on its own, HFCs were brought up as a main purpose of spending for climate change action. So we do have evidence that shows that humans are able to move quickly on an issue that they find pressing. So we just need to get to work. 3, it's only doom and gloom. I hear that. I think that a lot of people that hear climate change or global warming immediately think of depressing stuff like a starving polar bear on a thinning sheet of ice. Or maybe they feel guilty because they know that they are part of the problem with their own carbon footprint, which we'll get to later. Or maybe they just feel like it's just such a scary unknown that is being presented here. I mean, we have to change so much about the way we live and how we do things in order to change the trajectory of the planet. Those are all totally valid. Now here's another way to look at it. Climate change is an opportunity for humans as a species to reconnect with the rest of the world. In our choices, in our lifestyle, in our living. Climate change also is an opportunity for innovators and creatives to really shine. We need new ideas and we need people thinking outside the box. And climate change, it's an exciting adventure. It's a possibility for building a better world. It's an excuse to build a better world because besides climate change itself being a big problem that needs to be solved through these actions, there are many other issues that society faces today, such as racism and poverty and lacking education standards, change in infrastructure, an economy that focuses far too much on GDP. Maybe that's me extrapolating, but there's so many other things that we need to deal with, and climate change goes hand in hand with those things. So it really, when you think about it, it's an exciting new adventure. It is the next stage for humanity, possibly. So maybe it just needs a better term. Maybe we need to market it better. Instead of thinking of something like climate change or the climate crisis or the climate emergency, I mean, those are good terms for getting people to be like, yo, this is an issue that we need to focus on. But maybe we need to come up with something that's more, I don't know, exciting. Maybe the green enlightenment or the eco-lightenment, Utilitarian era. Or maybe the global priority check, you know, or the nature reconnect challenge, you know, like we can come up with other terms. Go ahead and put in the comments which of those were your favorite, or give me other suggestions for what we can call it. But it needs to be something exciting, you know, like the golden age, the enlightenment era, you know, because that's kind of what it is right now when you think about it. It's us reconnecting with nature, which is the Utilitarian idea. We reconnect with nature, we decrease our overall impact on the planet, and also we can fix a bunch of these other systemic issues that are also really big. So it's just all by how you look at it. 4, it's all or nothing. Now, this misconception is really an umbrella for many misconceptions about climate change. For example, if the solution isn't perfect, then we shouldn't talk about it. Now, this one I come across a lot, and it's a very common argument for people who are disenfranchised with any ideas to solve climate change. The expression, perfection is the enemy of progress, comes to mind. For example, I was talking to a friend about clean energy in the housing sector, and my friend responded by, there's no way that we can do that because we'd have to refurbish every single house to accommodate for electric form of heating and cooking. Okay. There's other things that need to be solved in order for housing to actually become zero emissions, for sure. But that doesn't sound to me like necessarily an argument against the whole clean energy grid idea. So You know, it's like there's things that, there's solutions that might also just not work everywhere. That's another one, is that, you know, only one solution method will do. And it's no secret in the environmental world, people seem to have kind of formed their own tribes. Like, for example, there's the pro versus anti-nuclear. There's the pro versus anti-geoengineering. There's the pro versus anti-capitalism. And all of those conversations I'm totally here for. These need to be what we are arguing about, not whether or not climate change is happening or humans are causing it, because we know we're moving on. But the arguments that we need to have are amongst different understandings of how to solve the issue. And this works when people listen to each other, which sometimes is hard for seasoned experts to do. So that's something that we need to bring back, is we need to listen to each other, because frankly the idea that only one solution is not realistic in the real world. For example, some areas like maybe Austin, Texas might do really well powering their city via solar, but that wouldn't work very well for a state like Portland, Oregon, which has a lot of overcast days. Can I help you? You're so needy today. For example, in Portland, Oregon, I don't think that was gonna happen. In Portland, Oregon, for example, it might just make more sense to do offshore wind because it's on the coast and there's a lot of wind off the ocean. Side note, offshore wind is my thing, especially for the West Coast. I feel like it's just so underappreciated. But anyways, that's a different video. But you know, there's not just one solution that fits all. Like, as another example, nuclear might be a great option for areas that already have that infrastructure built in, but it might not be a reliable option for us to move fast enough towards clean energy in the time allotted, because it takes a while for individual nuclear power plants to be created. And here's another version of the all or nothing argument. China's not going to do anything about it, then what's the point? This sounds like an argument that you would make to your parents to not do something because they didn't ask your sibling to do it. Are we really going to act like the US isn't the historic largest emitter? Yeah, China is the largest emitter now, but to act like the only time to ever jump on board with this is if everybody jumps on board at once is unrealistic. The US has a lot of work to do. So why are we just focusing on other countries? We're just trying to redirect the argument. And in addition to that, you know, China is actually moving faster than us when it comes to moving towards clean energy. And it has actually announced its plans for moving towards carbon neutrality, which is more than the US can say. Yeah, we need to work on international efforts for sure, but we can't use that as an excuse to just hold off domestic action. And another example for all or nothing is politicians must be perfect. And I don't think that's true. I don't think politicians need to have a completely shiny record to do good. For one thing, politicians are humans, and humans can be swayed one way or the other, and public opinion definitely helps sway a politician's opinion. Years ago, we did not really focus on climate change as an issue, so why would politicians really care? They are here to be there for the voice of people. It is a huge issue for the coming in administration if a politician that was elected for this next administration has history in the past of either receiving or giving money to certain organizations or doing certain actions in the past. That doesn't necessarily say that they are going to just completely do nothing. I'm not saying that looking at the history of someone and looking at their moral values is not important. It definitely is. But that doesn't mean that we should just discount people if they have some marks on their record, as long as it's not illegal marks. If it's illegal marks, that's a whole nother thing that we need to talk about. Number 5, technology isn't there yet. This is another really big misconception, and I think it's more common amongst people that are even interested in doing something about the climate. They just think, I would love to help, but the technology isn't available for us to solve the problem fast enough. And that's not true. In my humble opinion, I think that we probably have about, let's say, 90% of the technology figured out. We know how to power cities and countries on completely clean energy. Yes, we need to figure out the whole battery storage, but that is where we need to put more money into research. Research can move fast when provided the funds. So we do have a lot we can move on, and I don't want us to just get stuck on not doing anything because we don't have everything. We have enough to go ahead and get started. And this is also not to say that I think that development should come before research. Absolutely not. I do definitely support research before development, but we have done a lot of research for the majority of the technological developments that need to be made for us to move towards clean energy and a more sustainable way of doing things. Number 6, it's up to individuals and the consumers to make the change. I remember a few years back, starting to see the zero wasters on YouTube and the vegans on YouTube starting to denounce their movements because they found that it was either unsustainable for them to continue doing it, or that it was not healthy for their lifestyle to stay vegan. Now, they're kind of right, because right now the system, our current economic system, our current business standards are not set up for individuals to easily move towards a cleaner lifestyle. And one of the reasons why we even consider individual action and something like an individual carbon footprint is because companies like BP, which is a fossil fuel industry, actually advertised and promoted the idea of an individual carbon footprint to push off the blame from themselves to their consumers. And a similar thing has happened also with plastic-based industries for things like recycling. Unfortunately, we need to focus way more on the reduce and reuse, not the recycle part, because the recycling system is broken. Unless you are someone who put their whole career on becoming zero waste, like the trash for tossers lady, it's not a realistic standard. Other people have other things they have to do in their life, and not everyone can make that their main focus. In addition to that, it might not be reasonable for everybody to be able to go vegan, because veganism, as of now, even though it's gotten a lot easier to do something like that, is still relatively a privileged ability. In locations where fruits and vegetables are more expensive than a Big Mac. It's great for people that do want to do that, but I am saying that right now it feels like we're swimming upstream, and that is really where companies and governments need to be the ones to make that change. But number 7, individual action doesn't make a difference. Now let me go ahead and jump onto the other extreme. As you can see, it's kind of a theme, is that the extremes are the main misconceptions. But to say that individual action makes no difference, it might make people want to throw up their hands and say, well, I can't change my lifestyle, I won't bother becoming more environmentally friendly, because what's the point? But our job as individuals is kind of to reprogram ourselves. For example, we need to make different choices in our day-to-day lives. We need to think more before we purchase things. And this is all not me saying this on a high horse, because I have a lot of work to do myself. But, there's simple decisions that we can make that do make a big difference in our own individual environmental impacts. And in a country such as the US, the individual does make a very large impact. There are things that we can do, like checking Goodwill and Craigslist before going to Amazon. It's making sure that the farmer's market shop is a staple in your weekly schedule. It's choosing to reuse rags instead of using paper towels. It's simple changes that do make a difference. Only half of the purpose of those individual impacts is to change your own carbon footprint. The other half is to become a good role model for others around you. I have personally noticed, as I have moved on my own environmental journey, that other people around me, friends, families, colleagues, have also started moving towards a more sustainable lifestyle as they've seen me do it. If everybody in their community had a few people that changed their lifestyle more to show that, then that could make a big impact on the community at large, because it shows that it's possible and what things that other people can do to decrease their own impact without having to go through all the hassle of researching it themselves. And we've also seen from things like the lifestyle YouTubers that promote zero waste and vegan living that brands take notice too. And so those market cues are still important. Yes, individual action is not the end all be all, but it's definitely not nothing. If you want more ideas on how you can decrease your own individual environmental impact, I highly recommend you check out Shabizli. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Shelby. Number 8. The federal government will lead the way. I am definitely hoping that the federal government's change of administration will drastically change the way in which our country is moving. But I do recognize that democracy inherently is very slow. And especially when there is a huge political gridlock like there has been this last couple decades. So we need to also look at other forms of change. For example, state and local governments. Those are still important that we need to talk about. And also businesses and corporations. We need to focus more on their impact too. And we saw a lot of this from 2020. We saw states declaring their own plans for moving towards carbon neutrality, as well as companies such as Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon. So those changes are already starting to be made, but it's up to us to hold their feet to the fire. It's not time for us to twiddle our thumbs and wait for the federal government to just do everything. We usually forget, we being me, I guess, forget about the community aspect of impact. If we as individuals work to just change our own communities, that will make a big difference too. If my eyes are watering, it's because I can't stop yawning. I'm so sorry. My landlord doesn't know this yet, but my evil little plan is to create a composting system in our apartment. I would also like to do a little vegetable garden out front, because there's definitely enough land for it. I mean, it might take a little while because I just moved into this apartment last week and I have nothing but a brown thumb, not green, and minimal experience with composting, but I'll keep you posted on that. Number 9, it's a liberal problem. This is extremely unfortunate, and I don't know whether or not it's due to Al Gore and the inconvenient truth, or, which I think this is probably more likely, is that we have focused so much primarily on the federal government doing the majority of the change that needs to be done for this issue, and to Republicans who, again, the foundation of the Republican Party is to have minimal government intervention. That is terrifying, because we are suggesting that there needs to be more regulations, more taxes, more rules, and overall, and that sounds a lot like government overhaul. Now, that being said, if we had moved faster on the issue from the get-go, then we wouldn't have to rely so much on the federal government to do big changes. we unfortunately don't have as much time to focus on just market changes as we might have been able to do in the 90s. But it definitely should not just be considered a partisan issue, because frankly, we all have to deal with it. It being climate change, which will negatively impact the economy and weaken national security if not dealt with. Or we can make it an opportunity to fuel the economy with more jobs and opportunities to strengthen our national security, because having such large energy grids that domestic terrorists could easily knock out is not very nationally secure. There are statewide solutions, local solutions, community solutions, individual solutions, corporate solutions, market solutions. There are so many other things to do. And my last one, number 10, is only experts or zero wasters can talk about climate change. I am neither an expert nor a zero waster, and I'm talking about it. I guess I have a bachelor's in environmental science, so I do have some experience, but anyone who is able to Google search and critically think can have a say in this conversation. I did see a couple zero wasters come out and talk about how they are no longer zero waste, and one of the reasons why is because they were constantly guilted every time someone caught some plastic in the view of the camera. Why are we guilting people? I remember when I was trying to decide whether or not to do this YouTube video at all, and I wasn't sure if I should, because personally my own journey towards zero waste has had a lot of bumps in it, and that's okay, because as I discussed before, as of now it's nearly impossible to become zero waste, to become fully clean energy and clean living. Well, clean is kind of a word, but you know what I mean. It's nearly impossible to do that right now. So to then put the expectation that people can't talk about it until they get to that level of perfection, it has definitely hindered our overall chance to talk about this big issue. We shouldn't be judged on whether or not we are perfect ourselves in our own environmental impacts to talk about the systemic problem of climate change. Similarly, I've seen people such as Greta Thunberg be criticized for talking about climate change because she doesn't have a PhD in atmospheric sciences. Why does she need a PhD in atmospheric sciences to talk about something that is vital to her future? This is completely hypocritical, because we talk about stuff that we have absolutely no knowledge on all the time. The amount of people that trust random social media influencers on skincare advice or dieting culture, why are we okay following those people? But when it comes to listening to people's perspective on the issue of climate change, suddenly they're not okay to do so unless they have no impact on the planet and or they are an expert in the field. We need to move on from this perception, because everybody has a perspective and experience that helps bring new ideas and new innovation to the table. So those are my main top 10 misconceptions. What did you think? Did I miss any big misconceptions? I'm sure I did. There are plenty more. A little bonus misconception is the difference between climate change and global warming, which, as far as I am understanding, the main difference really between climate change and global warming is that global warming talks about the full trend of what is happening, which is the planet is warming. Climate change has been more focused as the main term because so many people have done an argument of, oh, if it's warming, then why is it so cold here? Because of climate change, because we are finding that as the overall global system is warming, there are going to be certain places that will get colder initially because of how it's changing our overall atmospheric system. So we have moved it more towards climate change for practical reasons. There's not some weird conspiracy on Al Gore or political agenda when it comes to switching it from climate change or from global warming to climate change. It's just practicality. So there's a little bonus misconception for you. But let me know what ones I missed, or go ahead and start the discussion for some of the topics that I covered, such as clean energy and what solutions you think work best, because that is really where I want to focus the conversation. We need to move towards a more utilitarian way of doing things, and that's where we're going to work on continuing with this channel, is just talking more about solutions. Now, I know that the next one that I said I was going to do has to do with tipping points and stuff, and that's not necessarily solutions, it's more and more misconceptions. It's really hard because I get into the same sort of problem of trying to debunk myths and to talk about the science and the basics and those sort of things instead of focusing on solutions, because I also think those things need to be talked about too. Like, I was looking through YouTube, for example, and I found very little videos talking about what tipping points actually are, and I think that's a very big misconception. But I do also want to talk about solutions, and then I think, okay, well, maybe I'll do more than one video next week, and then I go, Becky, you have a full-time job that's not the Beckosphere. So, yeah. I will see you all on Thursday in the Beckosphere. Bye.